There is a gap in leadership. Leadership and great leaders, like really committed leaders. Oftentimes they're focused on the wrong thing. It creates a gap. They think they're doing the right thing, focusing on strategy and execution, and they're feeling disconnected and not getting the results they want. Norman Wolfe, I believe you can help us with this.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Bridget, and I hope I can shed some light on how leaders can get out of that gap that you've described.
What are some of the ways that, A, you can figure out that you're in that spot of focusing on the wrong thing? And what are the right things to focus on?
Well, the first question is probably easier to answer than the second one, but we'll see how that goes. I think most leaders know they're experiencing that gap because of the level of discomfort they have or frustrations they're having and getting the organization to perform the way everybody agrees to. We develop the strategy, involve the right people, we go through the environment we're in, and we figure out what we need to do to compete effectively and how we have to change internally. And we lay it out. It's really nice. We're even getting very good on making it look pretty on pictures and diagrams and
color coding,
and even using artists to paint pictures of the future that we want to hold. All of that is good, and then we get what we call alignment. Everybody's buying in. But then over time, something kind of creeps in, a slowness, a dragging, a difficulty, problems not getting resolved at the right level. They're getting escalated. Leaders being pulled in, trying to motivate people to get them fired up and come on, guys, we can do this. And still nothing's happening. So it's that sort of level of discomfort where I like to say they're getting compliance, but not real commitment. And that's probably the biggest cause of the gap. And really, all of that is created by what I call the paradigm trap. All humans live within a framework, or I call it a context, of how we see the world. And through that lens, we are analyzing the world situations. We are determining what the right course of action is. And we don't think about it. That's the beauty of a paradigm. We kind of set up this framework and it lets us navigate life very easily.
Right.
Except when the navigation methodologies or the approach or the way we see it is not the way it really is. And then we're caught in a trap. And that's what's happened to business today.
So, Norman, what are some of the results that can happen when a leader is not aware of the gap and they just keep focusing on strategy and execution and they don't address it? What are some outcomes?
It's actually been very well documented. 70% of strategies fail to execute. By that, we mean they fail to achieve the objectives in the time frames they set out to achieve them. They may get it eventually, but it's usually with a lot of struggle. 70% of people are disengaged. There's some new statistics that are indicating that leaders in today's world are really struggling. I read one where I think it's at 68% of leaders feel extremely stressed and go home emotionally exhausted. So that's the problem. It's just not working for anybody. And so that's why for over 2 decades now, I've been looking at what does it take to actually shift that paradigm? How do we break the veil of illusion of what the organization really is and give them a way out?
I think it can lead to loss of talent. It becomes a retention issue for talented people.
It goes beyond just loss of talent, becomes a loss of human creativity. It's a loss of human energy. Even if people stay, having people who are disengaged or just coming to work to get a paycheck to go home without that level of engagement. I mean, it's like trying to get a mule to move down it's just hard to get people to do what's necessary for the success of the organization when they just really don't care.
Well, you really, in your history, I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you developed firsthand knowledge of these dynamics and what was possible as a senior executive with Hewlett Packard, and truly working on a turnaround in not just hitting goals, but I'll say the culture of what was happening with that organization. Is that where your passion started that's now led to writing books and speaking and consulting on this with quantum leaders, your
I think that laid the foundation. I think the initial interest you might say, started actually very early in my career. I was just out of university working for Pratt& and Whitney Aircraft. And I remember about 3 months, here I am eager, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to work. I actually left university after my first degree, not going on for my second one like I had intended to. And I was just really excited about this job opportunity to make a
Right.
contribution, to do something useful. And I remember I was probably 3, 4 months into my job, and the supervisor reminded me, Norman, when you come to work, you leave your personal life at home, at the door. I go, wow, how do I do that? Which part of me do I take off? What do I put on the hook outside? I mean, I literally,
That's
I
right.
talk about cognitive dissonance. I literally couldn't understand what he was talking about. And then probably 2, 3 years later, the same supervisor, a group of us were just talking about how much we enjoyed our work. And the same supervisor came in and he listened and he said, work is supposed to be work. It's not meant to be fun. If it was meant to be fun, this would be Disneyland and you'd pay us. I mean, it was like, so that kind of set the stage, I think, for me beginning this journey. That doesn't make sense. Why do we treat
Right.
people like that? Why do we treat organizations that way? Why do leaders have to lead that way? And then when I left Pratt& and Whitney, I worked for HP, I had an opportunity to move into leadership. And I guess I attribute part of it to the fact that my first performance review, the very first job, my very first year as a district service manager, I was ranked unacceptable in every category. And I think that was, in hindsight, at the time it didn't feel good, but in hindsight, it was probably the biggest blessing I had because I
What a
had a
gift.
choice then. I could either go back to doing what I did very, very well in the technical world, or I can apply the talents I had in systems engineering and solving complex problems to understanding the dynamics of leading an organization and creating results. So that's what I chose. And you mentioned I took over as a senior executive, I was responsible for the administrative organization for the Western Sales region. And it was about a $1.2 billion organization at the time. And it was failing. Every metric, every standard, we were the worst of all the 4 sales region, probably the worst in the world. And I had this challenge to turn it around. And yeah, that is
Right.
where I began to hone what does it really take to make an organization effective? And yes, it took a lot of changing the culture, shifting the narrative, I like to call it now, basically changing the context of why are we here, what are we doing, and what determines success. And then creating the space for people who wanted to contribute to actually make a contribution. And I didn't have the words back then. It was just something I kind of evolved to. But it was in the around the beginning of the turn of the century, right around 2001, 2002. And I was looking at recasting my consulting practice and giving it some focus, which it never really had. I was talking to a client and I said, Bill, why do you keep hiring me over and over again? He said, Norman, that's easy. You help me execute faster. And that's when I began to put all the pieces together. That's when I didn't really have an intention to write a book. Actually, I was at a conference and a woman asked me what I did. And then she said, well, what makes you different than other consultants? And I said, I think it's because I see organizations differently. I see them as something alive, like a person. They've got a soul and they've got a persona and they've got a way of operating as if it's not a collection of different people, but like a person. And she go, wow, you should write a book. Yeah, girl, she put me on a path that I couldn't get away from, though I tried. 2 years trying to ignore it, but my soul wouldn't let me.
And
And so I buckled down and I figured out how to be an author. In 2011, I ended up publishing the first book.
and that's the
The
living
living
organization.
organization. The living organization is about what I consider the new way to see. It's reframing the story, the narrative of what an organization is. Instead of looking at it as a machine of production, what does it mean to look at it as a person? And is there any reason why we should look at it that way? Is it really that way? And it turns out there's a lot of evidence that, and I talk about in the book, examples and anecdotes in research that indicates a collective of people that come together for a common purpose actually gives birth to a collective persona, a collective attitude, a
Yes.
collective context that causes it to behave as if it's a single person. And then I just began to extrapolate on that and say, okay, if that's what it is, how do I as a leader help that type of organization, that person, become more effective at creating the outcomes we need, formulated the principles behind the living organization. So the first book was all about the new way to see, and then then the challenge came, well, okay, so I can see it, but then how do I do that? How do I apply that? And so that
Right.
led me to recognizing they needed certain new skills. And over the course of working with leaders over the last decade and a half now, I began to identify the skills they needed. And that led to the second book, which is coming out September 1st, called Leading the Living Organization. And it describes the 6 skill sets. But this book is a little different than the first book. It's actually more fun to write because it's more of a narrative. It's a parable. So you got a CEO
Nice.
who took over her company because of her father having a heart attack. She didn't want to run the company, but she had to step in, and had to, so to speak. And
Right.
happened during COVID, when COVID hit, so she faced this major disruption in her business. And she had a pivot, and she had all the challenges of leading the organization, getting them to really work well together. And so she hires this consultant called Merlin, and Merlin comes in and helps her through. And then she goes, I really like the way you did that. Can I learn how to do that? And so Merlin begins to teach her the 6 skills necessary. It was a delightful book to write because like the way I view organizations, it was like raising a family,
Right.
so it was really,
It became its
it
own
became its own person,
entity with energy
energy and
and,
excitement.
you know,
And people
yeah.
who have reviewed it so far just have told me it's really a wonderful book. It's an easy read and it's really poignant and it's got a lot of, so we're looking forward to having it released in September and see what the rest of the world thinks.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm in leadership positions with my coaching clients, my coaching company, and myself. That's with the inner estate. I mean, ultimately, each of us is our own organization, and we lead ourselves before we lead anyone
Absolutely.
else. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I love that you picked up on companies, corporations, entities, businesses. They do have their own energy, culture, and it is something that you cannot mask. If you walk into an office and it doesn't have strong culture with committed people that know that they're valued and they want to be there, if it's full of people that are clocking in and out to get the check and doing the bare minimum, you sense it when you walk in. You can feel
That's a
it.
really important and insightful point you just made, because it's that notion that is in many ways at the core of what I discovered along the way as well. In the ability to sense what's really going on is such an important skill. Again, going back to my days at HP, and they used to teach us early on. I remember the training program we went through, early management training, talking about an HP principle called management by wandering around. BWA. I don't
Okay.
know if people are talking about it as much as they did when I was going through my leadership career. And the way they talked about it was go out on the shop floor and sense
Yes.
what's going on. Don't wait for the reports. Don't look at big data, although we didn't call it back then. You can tell what the data is going to be if you learn how to tune into what's going on. You'll feel your sense. And that ability to sense things is a critical element to effective leadership. But we never teach it anymore. It's one of the key skills we teach in our program. We call it heart-centered wisdom, because that ability
Yes. I like that.
to sense something doesn't come from the mind. It doesn't come from the 5 senses. It comes from tuning into the body almost. And the best way to do that is to calm the mind and shift into a different state of openness and curiosity, which are attributes of love, right? Love and caring. And so we
Right.
call it heart-centered wisdom. But it's the place
Heart-centered
where you,
wisdom.
where you have intuition, insight, inspiration, and wisdom. And that's what we need as leaders to navigate the nuance of an organization that's not a machine. Machines are easy. They're logical. You take measurements, you readjust things, and you turn it back on, and it's all fixed. Organizations as living entities are nuanced. They've got feelings and
Right.
belief systems, and you got to learn how to manage that, how to lead with that. And so that's why we develop the skills.
How much of an impact has there been on that ability to, manage by walking around and the heart-centered wisdom by so many employees now being remote? Has that been a detriment to leaders? Have we figured out a way around
It
it?
actually helps
Okay.
because, look, we're on call now, right? You can feel me, I can feel you. We can sense things, right?
Right.
If we open to it. So my conversations with remote employees allow for that. then I can sense when there's a indication that's never said, it's just felt that they're feeling disconnected, and I can address it. So I can actually enhance remote work by being able to connect to what's really important to be a human by opening up this ability to sense things and then respond to it. And it really makes life much easier. The leaders who keep resisting remote work are those who need to see people and see their behaviors and look for behavior indications and what they're doing, not that sensing of what's the relationship. I use a very simple
Right.
metaphor. If I
That's
walk,
right.
if I come home from work and
Yeah.
my wife is there and I sense something's off with her, and I go, "Hon, what's the matter? Are you okay?" And she'll go, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." Now, in the leadership world, okay, they said they're fine, so off we go.
Right.
In the reality world, it's
They
like,
must be okay. Right.
something's not right here, and I pay attention to that. I don't just dismiss it. And so that's the skill that happens when you think of an organization as a living person as opposed to a machine. Machines tell you and you just believe them. Well, they said they were okay,
You
so
talk a lot about subtle cues that leaders may miss and subtle cues that leaders can learn to be attuned into to be a more effective leader. I assume that's where you're tying in with this heart-centered wisdom, coming from curiosity,
yes. Yeah.
and having an open approach.
Yes. And it's not soft skills. I had a friend, and he's a CEO of another consulting company, and he was in the Green Berets, and he said, one of the things, and he began to learn about my work and heart-centered wisdom, excuse me, as I like to call it. He said, Norman, that's what they taught us in the Green Berets. They call it situational awareness. So it's not really a woo-woo skill.
Right.
And I can probably rename it to situational awareness or something like that. But I think it deprives us of what it really is, this ability to be a human to human connection.
Yes.
When there's a lot of talk in today's business world about psychological safety, and everybody's looking for the process to create psychological safety, process machine thinking. But in reality, psychological safety comes from somebody knowing the person they're in relationship with, and it is a relationship, cares enough about them to listen to who they really are, cares enough to see them for their truth, to pick up those subtle cues and to make it okay they feel the way they do, and then move forward from that reality. That's how you create psychological safety. The person feels psychologically safe, right? And
Hmm.
they're not being manipulated into feeling safe, right? And so you can't create psychological safety without being able to be a person who can open themselves to their own vulnerability and connect with a person in their vulnerability and make it safe for both of you. When you can do that, you create psychological safety. Again, you can see the language is love, caring, openness, vulnerability. That is not a head thing. That is completely a heart thing.
Right. And it also sounds like as you said, you're connecting with them as a human to a human. So when I hear you say that, you wouldn't kick off this conversation with, "Hey, Betty Lou, you missed your sales goal again. What's up?" So it's not about the result. I'm assuming that you would want to approach as a person. Am I
Yes and
correct?
no. I mean, one of the problems with the existing paradigm is it's the issue of bifurcating the business world from the people world. Now, you said you wouldn't be interested in the results; you'd be interested in the person. That's a mistake.
Okay.
Results are really what we're here to accomplish. So I would probably approach the person and say, I've noticed you missed your results. What do you think is happening, and how can you do better, and how can I help you do better?
Hmm.
So the focus is still on the results, but it enters into, instead of what's wrong with you, it enters
Right.
into how can you develop yourself? Now, that's another trap we have. Leaders tend to think it's my responsibility to develop a person. I'd like to change that a bit. It's your responsibility to help the person develop themselves. Slightly different orientation. Again, subtle nuance change, but it has a big shift in where is the onus? Leaders are burdened. It's hard to change another person. In fact, I consider it impossible.
Impossible.
I learned this through 3 divorces before I finally figured it out. I'm
Hey,
married
wait a
20
minute. I'm in that club too. Hey.
I'm finally married to a wonderful woman going on our 25th year, but it
Wow.
took me a
Congratulations.
lot of failures to learn. And one of the key issues is we keep trying to change the person to fit our story, our narrative. And Can't change people. That's just a given.
Right.
But people can choose to change themselves. And
Yes.
most people will want to if they feel safe to do it. So we're back to psychological safety. And people know that in the business world because they're trying to create environments where people want to change themselves, take more responsibility, take more accountability. But again, it requires the right environment to do that. And that's really the leader's role. Don't try to develop people. That means I have to make you do something. Create the environment where they feel supported to want to change. That's a subtle shift. But the results, and this is the piece that's missing in all of the, what you might call the soft skill recommendations.
Right.
The results is actually the most important element in establishing where changes need to happen, where growth
Yes.
opportunities exist. If you didn't have the results, you're just changing for change's sake. And that doesn't work either. So the living organization I recognized that really early, and it became a very core element. The living organization is actually designed to improve our ability to get better results. Like my client said, Norman, you helped me execute faster.
That's
I
right.
helped them get results better. And that's
Right.
what the living organization is really designed to do. So I look at it as the integration of the hard side and soft side into one side. It's like taking the
Okay.
head and the tail of a coin and saying, we're worried about the coin, not the head or the tail. You need them both.
It's got to be both.
It's got to be
It
both.
has to be combined. It doesn't have to be. If you want a change in the energy and the culture and the commitment more so than just compliance, and to hit the goal faster and or more efficiently, it may vary. It may vary depending on what
It's
the
going to
goal is.
vary because every
Right. But if
organization
you
likes
want
it
it to
different.
improve,
Yes.
you want to combine and almost
Yes.
like interweave it.
Yes. That's a
Okay.
beautiful way to say it. It's an interweaving of the two. They're synergistic to each other. So it's not one or the other, it's both. And when you get that, you actually get a very interesting synergy. It's like we call it the virtuous cycle of growth, right? Because I set the goals. The goals create challenges because if they didn't, we'd be doing what we already know how to do.
Okay.
So
Right. Yeah.
by definition, the goals set a challenge, right? To do something I can't do. The challenge serves as the catalyst that defines where the opportunities for growth are. So then if I focus on developing the capacity and the maturity of the organization, I increase its capacity to execute. Increased capacity to execute, we can achieve bigger goals, sets new challenges, and we enter this spiraling out virtuous cycle of growth that is just phenomenal to see.
If there's a leader out there that is feeling dissonance or disconnection, or they're continually missing targets, is there a first step? Is it like, what do you do if you're a leader that's feeling overwhelmed and underperforming right now?
I would suggest for them to kind of step back, and gain perspective. I sort of want to say, without sounding too self-serving, they should hire me. And the reason I say that is it's very difficult, whether they hire me or somebody else, it's very difficult to step back and gain perspective when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Good leaders learn how to, and we help all leaders learn how to step back. It's sort of like there's a metaphor that the fire chief never goes inside the fire. They always step back. They stand on the mountain away from the fire so they can see the path of the fire. So perspective is really an important element. And when you look at it, you want to look at it through the new lens. What is this living person doing? Not only what is the activity they're doing, but what is the nature of the relationships that's impacting their activity? And what's the narrative? What's the context? Why are they behaving that way? And if I can gain perspective on all of that, then I'm in a much better position to at least know what to address. If you just look at the activity, you're just moving chairs around the Titanic while the
Right.
ship's going down, and you
Yes.
just don't want to do that.
Yes.
And that's what frustrates them. They keep moving chairs around, but the ship's still sinking, and they
Right.
go block off the boiler room. Stop the ship from exploding.
Right.
Avoid the
So,
iceberg in the first place.
and I agree with you. What I heard you say there at the beginning when you said, reach out to me and reach out to quantum leaders and, see, because this is your specialty and the area that you've worked in for decades. What I hear when someone says that is, you don't have to do this alone.
Yes.
In communication, we all use it in this perspective, human to human.
Yeah.
Reach out to someone that can be there and be a sounding board and help you create change within yourself and how you're leading yourself. And then that's going to, in turn, impact your organization.
There are a lot of organizations that try to give leaders that supportive environment. Vistage, Renaissance Group. There's even the Christian-based faith paths like C12, and they're all wonderful organizations. They do help leaders step back. The problem is that they're not helping them reframe the context.
Mhm.
They're operating, they're supporting them within the existing paradigm. A leader needs to be able to support. And I'll tell you, just my own journey, and even though I wrote the book and I developed the framework and I developed the skills, the paradigm is just like a black hole. It wants to keep sucking us back in.
Yes.
Very difficult to catch myself in the midst of, I'm still thinking in the old paradigm. Even myself, who's written the book, and it's a very difficult thing. So gaining outside support, perspective is really, really helpful. Trying to do it on your own is going to be very challenging. I welcome anybody that wants to do it. Anybody that's willing to take it on themselves, God bless them. And I think I honor and respect them for that. But it's going to be very challenging. So support is wonderful. You
So
don't have to do
Norman,
it alone.
wait, you're saying that life isn't totally perfect and everything you do is just like rays of sun with, a herald of angels. It's not
Yeah.
perfection.
No. I try to do that in my life. It doesn't work.
Doesn't work now.
At least it didn't work for me.
Well, hey, I'll put you on the spot here. Do you currently have a coach or a consultant that you're working with?
I have 3 different individuals I work with as advisors and coaches and support. As a matter of fact, just the other day, I have a leadership group that I've created of leaders who are drawn to this work and want the support. And we meet monthly. And we met on the 15th of this month, just last week. And we open up with a check-in, like most groups do. And during the check-in, I was sharing how I'm going through my own journey of transformation. I'm remaking the quantum leaders. I'm redefining who my clients should be. I'm redefining who the community of consultants should be. And I myself am caught in the trap of, well, I often have to coach other CEOs in. The people who got me here are not necessarily the people who are going to get me there. So I'm
Right.
at that pivotal point in my own life, in my
Right.
own journey. So they said, Norman, you're in the hot seat this month. And so they coached me through the journey,
Excellent.
through my own challenges. It's a wonderful gift to have people who reach out, and each one at the closing said, Norman, you gave us the greatest gift today to allow us to help you. And so it works both ways. I mean,
It does.
that's the beauty of relationships. That's the beauty of caring, loving relationships. That's the beauty of being vulnerable with each other, because life's tough.
Yeah.
Life's
Well,
tough.
it's a sign to me that that organization you've created is a living organization because you felt comfortable enough to be vulnerable and lean in on that. And as you said, it's a rising tide that lifts all the boats. They felt better about themselves being able to be there with you in that journey.
And I mean, to give you a sense, part of it is, as I said, I have to reevaluate who my clients are. And some of the people in that group are my clients. So here I am,
Yeah.
being vulnerable, telling them I may have to let them go as clients.
Right.
And it's like, that's a scary thing to say but it turned out to be a wonderful conversation, and they all appreciated it. And one of the clients said, maybe I got to think about how I'm using you. Maybe I'm not being the kind of client you want to work with, and I don't want you to go away.
So that right.
Opened up,
Yes.
it's opened up a rather interesting new conversation with him. Yeah, I mean, life is so uncertain, and we're always trying to make it predictable. But if we learn to live with the openness of facing uncertainty, magic begins to happen. I don't know any other way to say it. At least that's what I'm learning in my life, and I'm still learning it. I'm 78 years old, still like a little kid learning new things. So
It's great.
never
I
ends.
mean, I hear people say that's the fountain of youth.
I think so.
Continuing to challenge yourself, learn, grow,
I think so.
being curious. So I want to go back, Norman, to earlier in our conversation. You are so excited. You have this opportunity with HP and you go in for that review, the first review. I have a couple of questions. When you went in, were you expecting to have unsatisfactory in each area, or were you sideswiped?
You're going to make me relive that moment, aren't you? I knew I was struggling as a manager. There were a lot of
Okay.
things. The service business within HP was not it was a profit center. It wasn't a cost center.
Hmm.
So I had to learn how to manage a P&L statement. Never even knew what that was.
Right.
My boss at the time once said to me, he said, I think this was after the review when I was looking for coaching. I said, I never had to manage a P&L. And he said, well, it's like balancing a checkbook. I said, what makes you think I balance my checkbook? I mean, there was such disconnect.
Right.
And so there was that. And you have to remember, I took over an organization that was not technically capable of doing the work they did. These were people who repaired computers. I was a software guy. I
Hmm.
programmed them. Helped sell them. I was able to apply them to customer challenges. Diagnosing, PC boards and component parts was not in my skill set.
Right.
These were technicians who came from the military, and I was a, college graduate. I mean, there was
Right.
so many disconnects between me and the environment I was in. So I knew I was struggling,
Right.
but unacceptable in every category. That threw me for a loop. I looked at it. I actually didn't. I can even remember the feeling now. I had no words. I didn't know what to say. I may have said something like, guess I'm a complete failure. Maybe I should go back to where I was successful. I think that's all I can remember of the
Hmm.
whole process. I don't remember what my boss said. I think I just went numb.
Right.
It was just such a shock. But like I said, fortunately, HP was a different kind of company, and there were people who were watching me. They recognized my boss wasn't necessarily the best boss. He wasn't a great coach. And so they helped me through that process. I remember the general manager himself took me to lunch and encouraged me. He said, Norman, we see some really good leadership skills in you. We see some really
Hmm.
good thinking skills in you. I know you struggled. You weren't in the best of environments, but stick with it. We think you can be one of our greatest leaders. Turned out, to my surprise and my pleasure, that I was one of the top leaders when I
Hmm.
finally left. So it was a wonderful experience. And that was that's why I look back at it and then I laugh. Even through all the pain of the moment, it was really a gift in
Yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah.
Really a gift.
And I believe it was as well, because when something is that black and white, it causes you to choose. So you
Yes.
choose, like, well, okay, I'm going to dramatically change this paradigm that I'm in and learn skills, seek help, what you did, obviously, to make it through that. And if it had been if it had been ambiguous,
Yes.
you may not have taken as decisive as action as you did. And you may have just struggled, floundered, and then gone back to something else.
That's very insightful. I think that the way you frame that is sort of a simple A or B choice, black or white, so to speak. It does force you to make a choice. And once you make a choice, life moves on, right? Whichever way.
Right.
But if you hang out in that state of, well, maybe, maybe not. It reminds me of another recent engagement with one of my clients. He had an individual who wasn't performing. He was unwilling to make the changes to fit the strategy. Then he was a very good performer up until they shifted the strategy.
Hmm.
And the leader was reluctant to establish that, call it A B choice, black and white choice. And the individual struggled and he became a drag on the rest of the team.
Right.
But the individual eventually discovered for himself that he wasn't being successful and chose to leave. And when he left, the energy in the organization just freed up.
Yeah.
And I said to the leader, I said, if you had just giving him the choice, get on board or leave, not bad or good, no
Right.
judgment in it, it's a choice, you would have solved this problem 6 months ago.
Right.
And you would have been 6 months. You would probably be a year ahead because you wouldn't have been dragged back 6 months. And
That's
that's
right.
that's a challenge leaders have. And one of the reasons leaders have that challenge is because even though they like to think of an organization as a machine, there's a part of them that is totally human. And they know making decisions will have an impact on a person's life. And they don't know how to make those tough decisions. I often counsel leaders. I say, look, first make a decision. This happened to me at HP. I had a manager come to me with a very challenging individual situation. It was around the Christmas time frame, and he was really struggling with what to do. He knew the person wasn't performing well, but making that and it just stopped him from making the decision. So I said to
Right.
him, I said, okay, stop. You have a job to do. Let's just say that job requires a hammer. Is this person a hammer? No, he's more like a screwdriver. Well, that's a useful tool, but not one that's going to help you. Okay. Can you turn him into a hammer? Do you think that's even part? No, he's solid screwdriver. Okay, so now we've got the decision. You have to replace him.
Right.
Now. And he went, yeah, but I said, wait a minute. We made the decision first. Then we worry about how to implement it. And you can implement it with a lot of love and caring, but you know what the decision is, and it makes the implement. You're not caught in this, I can't make the decision because this might happen, and what decision should I make? You know what the decision is. Separating decision from implementation is one of the most useful skills I learned over the years, and it helps with these situations. It's
It
not like
does.
I'm being a bad person. I can be human, and I can help the person discover they're a screwdriver, not a hammer. And they're trying to be a screwdriver in a hammer job. Why? They're frustrated, like this guy. He finally left because he was frustrated, trying to be a screwdriver in a job that now called for hammer. It used to be a screwdriver job, but now it's a hammer job. I mean, I use this as a metaphor, but I think it's easy to extrapolate how
It
leaders
is.
just,
And I like that metaphor because we're not saying screwdrivers are bad.
no,
He's still skilled.
he's a wonderful screwdriver.
Give him the freedom where he can now go and be a screwdriver where screwdrivers are needed, wanted, and valued.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
I
it's
run into
also
that.
possible to say, to give him the freedom to make a choice. I've been a screwdriver all my life. I'd really like to be a hammer. And okay, well, now we've got a
It's a
different,
different conversation.
the power of empowering people is really synonymous with giving them choice. If they don't have choice, then they're a victim to somebody else's choices, and they
Right.
can never be empowered. So we want to teach leaders how to give people choices within boundary conditions.
Right.
Just like when I was raising my daughter, I really worked to give her all the choices possible within boundary conditions. And the older she got, the wider the boundary conditions she got,
Right.
because she became more and more mature. She can handle more and more complexity. And so I kept the boundary conditions expanding so that she had the opportunity to become even more mature. And that's what we have to do as leaders, is understand what the maturity level is of the people or the organization, the department, and then give them the freedom to operate with that, and then allow them to keep growing by expanding those boundary conditions to where they're acting like they're the CEO. They know how to make those complex decisions. They can do it on their own and do it for the good of the organization. You just imagine where every micro decision that is made in an organization, day after day, moment after moment, by every person in the organization, every decision is made as if the CEO was making it.
Yeah.
What a different organization.
Completely different organization and completely different results.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would be so dramatic, it's difficult to even make a projection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what we're striving for with the Living Organization, is to get to that kind of organization where everybody is consciously choosing what's good for them is aligned by what's good for the organization and vice versa. And they're making decisions within that context. Everybody's life is better. Everybody's life is better. We'll get there. That's what I've committed the rest of my life to. So we'll see how far
I mean,
I go.
you're building it through your community
I'm building.
and with other consultants. You're building it with the consulting and coaching services through Quantum Leaders. And now the new book coming out September 1st, Leading the Living Organization.
Yes.
It's so people have time right now. They could go ahead and get your first book, The Living Organization, and be prepared for September, depending on when they're listening to this podcast. Norman.
We've actually making the first book available for free.
You are? Okay.
thelivingorganization.com/book 1.
Excellent.
And they can download a free copy of book 1.
Mm-hmm.
So they're prepared for when book 2 comes out. And we hope it stimulates the interest to get book 2.
Well, I feel like that would be a great first step, that if any leader is out there that's feeling overwhelmed or listening to us and they stayed in the conversation, they're like, these two make it sound like it's easy. That could be a good first step in quieting the mind and changing your own course, which every leader needs to do if they want to create that change in the organization. So I want to thank you for sharing this insight, for being vulnerable with us and sharing that it's not as if it's just been a straight, line of perfection and everything is easy and perfect, because it's not. And yet you can still create, contribute, grow, enjoy it, be vulnerable. So being a role model of that
Thank you.
possibility is huge. So thank you for doing that. If you are listening to this episode of The Inner Estate, I hope you will join us on the next one and leave a comment below. What are you doing to make sure that you're showing up as a leader that is treating your opportunity as a living organization and developing the heart-centered wisdom that's going to allow everyone in your organization to either self-select out, go where they can be a screwdriver, or reach their goals. Norman, thank you again.
Thank you, Bridget. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thank you for bringing me on your show to share my ideas with your audience. It's been a real delight.